I heard you mention a study from Brigham Young University. It was like a meta-analysis of 300,000 people, and the suggestion was it was that the healthy relationships was it was like a 50%. Those with healthy relationships, or the healthiest relationships, it was like a 50% decrease in cardiovascular disease, and significant, or maybe it was all cause
All
mortality.
cause
That's what you said.
mortality,
Yeah,
including
all
heart
cause
disease.
mortality is the thing.
Yep.
Yeah, what
50%.
what's going on there? What what do we do? What do we do? What do we do with that information?
Okay, so and just to clarify what that means, so 150, I'm sorry, it was 148 studies in this meta-analysis, over
Yeah.
300,000 study participants. People with healthy social bonds had a 50% reduction in premature death from everything. Okay?
Hmm.
All cause mortality means 50% reduction in death from everything. That is crazy. There's no supplement like that. There's no treatment. There's no special class. It's our relationships. And by the way, they
Yeah.
pointed out they found that this was more impactful on our health than exercise, than beating obesity, than all these other factors. It is the quality of our relationships. And what it
Yeah.
is, that's a very powerful epigenetic influence or epigenetic input, because our environment is determining how our genes are getting expressed, internal and external. Again, I don't want to make the distinction between the two over and over again, but we have to, because a lot of times when we think about environment, we think about the outside world, but we are a part of that as well. We're a part of nature as well, but
Yeah.
we as humans, we see ourselves different. We go out in nature. You are nature, and
Yeah.
so this is all encompassing. This is omnipresent when I'm talking about our environment. And actually, I haven't talked about this yet, but I don't know if you know about the Dunedin study by
Mm-mm.
chance.
Mm-mm.
So this has been going on for years. Longitudinal study tracking the same people, and
Oh,
this was
The Harvard study, the longest longitudinal one, or a different
no,
one?
that's my guy Waldinger at
Okay.
Harvard, right? Which they have another really great longitudinal study. This one was
Yeah.
done by researchers in New Zealand, and they tracked from birth. All right, the test subjects coming out of the womb, track them all the way through for decades. And of course, these kids went off to all these different parts of the world, and they would fly them in, whether they moved to Costa Rica or they moved to Alaska every year, check in on their biometrics, all their data, their successes, their failures, their struggles. Some people, obviously passed away. Here's one of the craziest things found in this study that is not talked about. Yes, of course. Again, same thing, relationships, top tier of importance. But what they pointed out was how powerful our mindset is in how we age, our beliefs
Oh,
about
sure.
aging and ourselves
Yeah.
has a huge role in how we're aging and how functional and healthy we are. It's our
Yeah.
perception of ourselves and what is, quote, supposed to happen. And
Yeah.
if you think about that, it's like a very logical um, phenomenon, which is our thoughts create chemistry in our bodies. Our thoughts change what's happening in our bodies instantaneously. And I've had a
Yeah.
couple of conversations with Bruce Lipton about this. He's a cell biologist, really the person, from my perspective, who put epigenetics into popular culture, the awareness of it. And in these conversations, he kept on referring me back to when I would talk about things like nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics and how our food impacts our genetic expression, our relationships, all these things. And he's like, yeah, Sean, but the mind first, the mind first. He always brings me back to that. He never lets me get away from it is our mind first and foremost, because our
Hmm.
mind determines our perception of the food we're eating.
Yeah.
Our mind determines the perception of the quality of our relationships. We can have an awesome relationship. All right. I could be a great dad, doing all the things, love the shit out of my kids. But then, one of my kids can be like, you know what? You weren't there for me when I needed you in seventh grade. And, Billy hit me with the wiffle ball bat or whatever it is. And I just thought about wiffle ball bat because of Beastie Boys song. I don't know if you did it like this, did it like that, did it wiffle. Yeah. So, anyways, but they can have a story, a perception about me as a parent that might not necessarily be advantageous for them. and make them suffer because, no matter how good I am, it is their perception of me that is going to determine their outcomes. Now, here's the
Yeah.
reason why this matters and why he kept pointing me back to this. So even in my university level biology classes and, I had nutritional science and all these different classes that I paid good money for, and I was kind of miseducated because we were missing the point on something. But we're taught this framework of DNA to RNA to protein, DNA to RNA to protein. So our proteins, like when we see each other right now, we're seeing mainly proteins that have been printed out, or copies that are getting printed out based on the genetic blueprint. And what Bruce shared with me is that one epigenetic input, all right, so which could be a food, it could be a thought, can change the proteins that are getting printed. It can create up to 3,000 variations of the proteins getting printed from one gene. This is
Sure.
why we are
Okay.
all so different, why we have so much variety in our outcomes, in our temperament, in our health. It's because of how many variations can happen with which proteins are getting printed out. And so just to encapsulate all this, number one, mind first, because our mind is determining, even if we're eating, quote, bad food, what the data shows is that if you're in a high state, of happiness and, you're more in this parasympathetic state, amongst friends and feeling good, even a, quote, bad food will not impact you negatively or as negatively as when we tend to eat, quote, bad food, quote, stress eating. I just threw a lot of quotes unnecessarily. Stress eating is a real phenomenon in our world today, but we tend to do that when we're stressed, and it tends to
Yeah.
add on to the stress versus the best time to eat something, extraordinary that might not be necessarily good for you is when you're in a high state, when you feel good, because your
Yeah.
perception is impacting how that food is going to interact with your cells.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. If you did, feel free to tag a part of it. You can tag me at Aaron Alexander on Instagram. Recently changed the handle from Align Podcast to Aaron Alexander. That was a long process of procuring that mofo, but we were able to get it, which is cool, convenient. So you can tag me at Aaron Alexander. You can also tag Shawn at Shawn Model, I believe is his Instagram handle. And feel free to jump over to the Align Podcast YouTube channel. Subscribe over there so you get each week's videos. That is it. That is all. Thank you all. I'll see you next week.